Hello, heathens. Thank you so much for joining me. So today I am going to be talking about true crime and true crime related fiction books. So this video and me reading a series of these kind of books was really kicked off mainly by this one. So this book will bury me by Ashley Winstead, and what this book does is it focuses on a girl who gets into kind of online crime sleuthing after the death of her father, partly to deal with her grief. She uses it for different reasons, but basically she's part of these forums online that kind of go look at real cases and try to solve them, and sometimes start competing and try to solve it before the police. And then another one, and this one I've had on my shelves for a while, and I finally got around to reading it, is Eliza Clark's Penance. So this book basically it focuses on a fictionalized case in an English seaside town of a girl who got murdered by two other schoolgirls. And the reporter in this kind of he's writing about this event, kind of goes in and unpicks and dissects the case, does all the interviews, talks to all the people involved to really understand almost why and what was going on sort of behind the scenes in this town. And I think those two kind of started me. They also ask questions around the morals, the ethics, the interest in true crime. And then I've got a whole bunch of other books here that do the same thing. But it did get me thinking a bit more about my own kind of interest and fascination in true crime in the real world, as well as true crime and podcast and memoir interview style books in fiction. Because for me, for crime and thriller fiction, it is something that I love. I love interview style anyway, in any genre, or like books that read like a biography but that are fictional, and I sort of love that format. But particularly in sort of crime and thrillers, I find it really interesting. And what I loved about this one, the Ashley Winstead, is you got a real kind of insight into the world of these online sleuths and the methods and the things that they use to actually investigate these real crimes. And again, it brings up this question of ethics. I mean, some of the people in this group are like hacking databases, they're hacking official databases, they're pulling up medical records, they're, pretending to be someone to talk to friends of the victims, all of those things. And it's like, well, how far is too far, and the thing is, for most of them, it's coming from from a good place, because they want to solve the case. They want to get justice for the victim, but at the same time, at what cost, and how far do you go, and how far do you insert yourself into these investigations? Is it too far? And then I think also what this book asks is our fascination generally as a society with true crime. Now, you can argue that just really watching the news, reading the papers, watching the news is almost like engaging with true crime, because, reporters, newspapers, news outlets, they talk about things that happen. We hear about these serial killer cases. It is all in the news zeitgeist. So in a way, you're absorbing and engaging with true crime all the time. But then obviously there's taking it a step further. So I'm somebody who, and I hate to use the word enjoys, but I do, caveat with not like enjoy haha in a way, but I love listening to true crime podcasts. I love listening to cases being dissected and analyzed. I love programs like Criminal Minds, where you're going into the minds of criminologists and psychologists to understand the reasons behind and the whys of some of these crimes. Because a lot of these things, they come across as being like, how can another human being do that to someone? And I find kind of delving into the human mind, and particularly the darker side of the human mind, really fascinating. Criminology was something that, if I could go back, would be something that I would love to study. I find it incredibly fascinating. And on that point, I also have some non-fiction books that I'd like to recommend, but one that's particularly good while I'm actually talking about this topic is Dark Side of the Mind, and this is by Kerry Danes. She is a forensic psychologist, so kind of like what we colloquially or kind of in fiction know as criminologists, but she goes and she talks to offenders. She goes into prisons, and this book is her kind of memoir of different cases in different parts of her career and different people she spoke to. It is incredibly harrowing because you're getting details of cases and the psychology behind some of these people, but is incredibly interesting and is true. You're really getting to understand what's going on in people's minds and the psychology behind it. So, if you're looking for something non-fiction and something that's real, this is a really great book. So I find all of that interesting. I find hearing about those crimes sometimes in a way it can almost be like a warning as well. I'm going to be completely honest, listening to a lot of these stories, listening to things that happen to people, it has made me more aware. It has made me more wary of strangers, of people kind of coming up to me. I'm not the person you want to come up to in the street to try to vlog something to, because I will tell you to go to hell. I'm not afraid to be like, no, go away. Because in so many of these cases, particularly as a woman, the draw and the reeling in is being nice and being sweet and giving people your time. And that's where Bright Young Women comes into play. That book I know has been widely read, widely discussed. People either love it or don't love it. It is fictionalized, but it's very heavily based on the Ted Bundy case, but it never names the defendant. And it focuses on the women involved and kind of the fictional stories behind that. And one of the things that your main character says over and over again is, at the time, and this was in the 70s, and I don't know if so much has changed, but this was in the 70s, and they were sorority. So famously, he went and he killed girls in college campuses and sororities, and they were very much told to be nice, to be sweet, and to always, you had to put up this front of being liked as a woman. So bottom line is, you have to be liked. People have to like you. You can't be abrasive. You can't be abrupt. You have to, smile when someone talks to you. You can't, you can't shut the door. You have to give people your time. You have to be liked. You have to be liked, and you have to make people like you, and you have to do everything for other people. And I think that is very much a kind of a core tenet in a lot of these stories as well, where women are taken advantage of because that's the stance of being, a nice, sweet woman. So I think for me, a lot of those stories have also kind of resonated with that. And I find it really interesting to understand the hows and whys and mechanics behind it. Is it ethical or not ethical? I'm not going to make a judgment on that either way, because I don't think I'm the person to judge that. I think each person kind of judges it on their own, whether you enjoy it or don't enjoy it, or like engaging with it or find it interesting for whatever reason that is to you. In a fictional sense, I don't think there's anything wrong with it in a fictional sense, because it's fiction. We read about so many weird and twisted and wonderful and strange things in fiction that I have absolutely no problem with it. I know there's been some criticism towards Bright Young Women. I think it's a great book. I think the author did a great job. So I don't criticize that at all. At the end of the day, it is fiction. It's not real. And to that end, like I said, I enjoy reading thrillers and crime novels that have that element. So I briefly spoke about these two. Like I said, this one is so interesting because you've kind of got this seaside town. You've got these girls, like teenage girls. One of them is brutally attacked, set on fire and killed. And that's not a spoiler, because that is literally the setup of the book, by 3 of her friends, or so-called friends, 3 other girls at school, 3 teenage girls. They are in jail. And this journalist is kind of going back and recounting the story. And with this one, though, you know who did it. It's more around a character study. What I will say, if we're just critiquing the book, this was a pizza margarita with extra topping. So when I say that, I mean it was good, But I felt it sort of dragged in the middle a little bit. I felt like we got some perspectives that were we went into so much detail that to me didn't feel terribly relevant to what happened and the crime and the case. And I don't know, this wasn't my favorite. And I know a lot of people really love this book, but I thought it was interesting, but this one wasn't my favorite. This book will bury me. I did a very detailed review on this. I adore this book. Like I said, I loved that pulling back of the curtain for the online sleuthing community and, you know, how they insert themselves into these investigations and what they do and their methods. And I also love the fact that this, and Ashley Winstead does say this is also a book about grief and how people deal and process grief. So our main character, she's just lost her father, and she finds this online community like a new family almost to help her deal with her grief. And she's also then employs some of these tactics to actually learn more about her father and get to know her father more above and beyond what she knew of him as a father, and kind of delving into his history. And I think this is a brilliant book on many levels. I think the commentary is great. I love the fact that it is about grief and how people handle grief. And I love that glimpse into the online sleuthing community. And the ending, I was like, whoa, I liked it. Then another few books that I would absolutely recommend. So one that I will briefly touch on that kind of falls into this is Night Film. So Night Film by Marisha Pessl is one of my all-time favorite books. This is a Satan tier book for me. I adore this. I have ordered every dish on the menu. Charlie Hunnam has not only served me the cocktails in Nothing But a Smile, but he's also served me all the dishes, and Jason Momoa helped him. You know, this is that kind of book for me. I've read this book a couple of times, and she chonky. And I think this is fantastic. So this is it falls into that a true crime kind of stance, from the sense of this is a journalist who is investigating this very kind of famous and notorious filmmaker's life and his missing daughter, or his dead daughter, missing, we don't know. So he kind of goes and he investigates what happened to Ashley and Cordova, who's the filmmaker. You know, there's all these kind of weird rumors and things about him and sort of the occult and occult films and all of that. And this journalist really starts delving into this case, becomes obsessed with it. You know, this really ruins him. He loses his job, he loses his relationship, he basically loses his mind trying to unpick and unravel and uncover what happened to Ashley and what is behind all of the rumors and the speculation around Cordova. So this, again, one of my all-time favorite books, and I think it's incredible. And it also, with this one, let me put those down, this has like mixed media elements. So if you look at that, these are like search engine printouts. There's, you know, things like that. There's newspaper articles, if I can find any right now. I mean, there's things like that. And it is really, really brilliantly done. And I just think a standout book in that kind of genre. If you like your podcast element, if the podcast element is more for you, we're going to talk about these ones. So these three are very much podcast related. So Listen for the Lie by Amy Tintera. I think this is probably the most popular one. I know a lot of people have read this. A lot of people have really liked it. People recommend the audiobook. I agree. I listened to the audiobook. It's fantastic because you get those podcast elements in the audiobook. So this one is about our main character, Lucy. She is she's kind of having a bad day when we meet her. She gets fired from her job. Her relationship kind of sucks, and she gets the feeling her boyfriend wants to break up with her, but he can't get up the nerve. Reason being, she may or may not be a murderer, so I think he's a little afraid to break up with her. Now, that is because when she was younger and back in her hometown, her best friend was murdered. And the whole town, including her parents and her ex-husband, think she did it. So they think Lucy did it. However, she was questioned by the police. She was never officially arrested or obviously tried or convicted for this. Her kind of stance on it is, I cannot remember. She can't remember that night. She remember bits and pieces, but she cannot remember. She herself, Lucy, does not know whether she did it. So what happens is that there is a podcast, and the podcast features Lucy's story. So that dredges everything up. her boss becomes aware of it, everybody and their uncle becomes aware of it, her boyfriend becomes aware of it, and that's why her life is spiraling a little bit. And she gets a call from her grandmother to say, come back home, it's my birthday, I want to see you. And she's just like, ugh, back to the hometown. And it's like the podcaster is actually there doing interviews, and in a way she wants to know the truth, and you unravel this mystery through the podcast and through the different interviews with everyone involved. It is fantastic. I love this. I did not know who the whodunit was, so I thought this was fantastic. Then in that same kind of vein, you have these two books, The Night Swim by Megan Golden, and then Beast by Matt Wesolowski. This one is probably not, certainly judging by the amount of like reviews and ratings it has, not as popular, but I think this is really good. And actually, this is a whole series. So this is part of a six stories series. The series is called 6 Stories. It is basically a fictional podcast called 6 Stories, and in each book, the fictional podcast host investigates true crime, a particular case. So, you know, very much following the format of real life podcasts. And I have read quite a few of them. I think this is like the 4th or 5th book. You don't necessarily have to read them in order because each one is a different case. But this one is particularly appealed to me because there was mention of vampire in this. So Beast, the Beast referred to on the cover, is the Beast from the East. That's not necessarily PC, but okay. And it refers to this little, again, this is set in England. This is a British author. And in this little town, there's this kind of town history rumor that says when the town was kind of founded, they brought across a Russian princess, but she was also suspected of being like a witch. And then after she died, there's this thing that she's now a vampire, and she's been kind of haunting the town ever since. So the Beast from the East refers to this alleged vampire. And the setup for this book is that you have Lizzie B. She has a YouTube channel, okay? And she's from this town, and she's kind of a local town hero. So, similar again to, is it Zoella here in Brighton that has a YouTube channel? Anyway, it's that kind of thing. So she does unboxings and shoppings, and, you know, people send her stuff, makeup and things like that. So she has that kind of channel. And then she decides she's going to do this challenge. It's called 6 Days Till I Die. And this kind of, it's one of these online challenges that apparently every day you get like a prompt for a dare by the vampire. The vampire sends you a WhatsApp, because apparently the vampires are with the modern age now. And you have to do these dares. If you get to the end of it, you meet the vampire and you meet your death. So she's kind of doing these dares, but she dies while doing these dares. So our book, this particular 6 Stories podcast, focuses on Lizzie B. Again, they caught the people that killed her, and the police have always maintained this is a prank gone wrong. They are in jail. There is no doubt about that. But someone scrawls on the wall who really killed Lizzie B, which is then what prompts the podcaster to come in and investigate, and we go from there. It's very good. This is very, very good. I really enjoyed this. It was very interesting. I enjoyed that addition of kind of that mythology and that slight vampire weirdness to it. I loved it. I what can I say? I loved it. I thought it was really good. If you like, I will go back to this one, but if you like the kind of slightly supernatural bent, may I recommend the Book of Cold Cases? And this is by Simone St. James. I love Simone St. James. I know people have like mixed reviews on her books. Sundown Motel I know is her favorite. Some of the others people don't like. I love her writing. This book is fantastic. So again, this book focuses on a woman who works in a doctor's office during the day. So she's kind of the receptionist in a doctor's office. But then her kind of hobby is online true crime blogging. She's a true crime fanatic. She loves true crime. She listens to all the podcasts, reads about all the cases, and she has this online blog, and her blog is called The Book of Cold Cases, where she talks about real life crimes and she kind of dissects them and proposes theories and things on them. And again, in her hometown, there is, she's sort of in the doctor's office one day, and this woman walks in and she's like, oh my goodness, she says to her colleague, do you recognize her? And it turns out that this woman, many years ago in the 70s, was accused of being a female serial killer. I think they called her the female Zodiac, which, I mean, if you know anything about serial killer law, 99% of serial killers are men. So, first of all, that was unusual. So, of course, that garnered, I think it was the lady killer, they called her, that garnered, you know, mass appeal from the press. She was put on trial. She was eventually not convicted. So she was acquitted of the crime. However, no one really knows, right? Everybody's suspicious. And it's a case that our main character's kind of been delving into. And then she sees this woman in the doctor's office. And then she reaches out because she thinks, what the hell? Let's see if I can interview her. And she says yes. And we go from there. So there's a little bit like she's telling her story. You're figuring out what really happened, who really done it. There's a slight supernatural twist in this as well. And I think if you know Simone St. James, she loves to do that in her books. I loved this. I thought it was so, so good. Again, you've got the past and the present. So you've got the 70s. And I think this is 2017 or 2018, the kind of modern day. So good. So good. Yeah. I just think this is really good. So if you like a little bit of that supernatural, but if you go back to kind of purely podcasting, this is The Night Swim by Megan Golden. Love this. So this was one that's been on my list for ages to read. And I thought I was going to like it, but I really liked it. So this is about our podcaster, Rachel. Yeah. The Rachel Kroll podcast. So she is a true crime podcaster and she's very successful. And she's gone to this town, I think it's in Laguna, is it Laguna? I think it's Laguna. Because there is a rape trial happening. What a boy who is a very prominent member of the swim team, you know, he's kind of being primed for the Olympics. He is accused of raping a high school girl in this town. So he's kind of university, she's a high school girl. And of course you can imagine the town's kind of split on opinion. And our main character, Rachel, she goes to kind of cover this story for her podcast. So you've got that and that crime and all of the harrowing, just how rape trials are dealt with, how rape victims are dealt with, how rape victims are victimized a second time when they have to testify when the accuser does not. You know, how women were and are still slut-shamed. You know, all of these things really, really good, really hard-hitting, I think, and some great commentary on this. But then you also have a second case. So when she gets like a note when she arrives in town, and this is from a girl who says her sister Jenny, she died years previous, and it was ruled like an accidental death, but she's convinced that it was murder. And obviously because of the podcast, she wants her to like investigate what happened. So she's almost looking at two cases, and it's really interesting. And then things start to sort of intersect, and you see how, you know, everything sort of intersects in this town. But again, it's in that same vein of what happened to this girl years and years and years ago and what's happening now. And I think this is fantastic. There is a second book in this series. I don't know if there's any more, but I know there's a second one, and I'm absolutely going to purchase and read that second one because this is so, so good. And like I said, just some really interesting commentary on that one, and really makes you think. And then the last two I have here. So, True Crime Story by Joseph Knox. So this is an interesting one. I've had this for ages, sort of just floating around. And this is set, it says in the early hours of the 17th of December, 2011, Zoe Nolan, a 19-year-old Manchester University student, walked out of a party alone and she was never seen again. So that's kind of your setup for this crime. So this is the true crime that happened, right? The fictional true crime that happened. And then you have, again, this has got sort of like mixed media where you've got like the interview styles, but then you've got emails. So again, the premise of this book is that our author, Joseph Knox, who is actually the real author of this book, he was corresponding with another author who was writing a book about this crime, about Zoe's disappearance, and she was reinvestigating the disappearance and trying to work out what happened, because again, it's one of those where no one really knows what happened to this girl, and no one really, you know, so she's going back and she's investigating it. So she's investigating this true crime so she can write a book about it. So this one is a bit like Penance in that sense. But you find out very much in the beginning something happened to this author, and Joseph, who is also an author and had also written books about true crime, he kind of took over and published what we have here. Right, stay with me. None of this is real, but this is the premise. So he has kind of got his notes in the beginning. He sort of interjects. There's some additional interviews that he did, but he's basically taken all her research, all of her interviews, and put it in a book, added some extra things. And as we go through, we start to find out not everything is as it seems. Not everybody is as they seem. And again, that is a running theme in these books, particularly in Penance. Also in Beast, you know, people aren't quite as sweet as they pretend to be. So you kind of learn all the secrets and the friendships, and they're not quite what we thought they were. And so it's really interesting, because I had to really stop myself at times, because I was like, this isn't real, but it kind of feels real, especially with like the email correspondence in between, and then what happened to this author that was actually trying to write about the story, you know. And I did not guess the bad guy in this. I didn't. Maybe I'm dense, but I didn't. I thought this is very, very good. Very, very, very good. Then one that's kind of adjacent, but not quite. This is Unfollow Me by Charlotte Duckworth. And I actually picked this up, I think, like in a library sale for like £1. I was like, oh, it kind of fits into, I think, what I'm reading. Let me try it. And it's about so this is, I'm going to have to be completely honest here. This is a world that I know nothing about and have no intention of ever delving into again, is kind of the online like Mumsnet forums. So for women with children, you know, there's bloggers and there's YouTubers that talk about their kids and give tips on child rearing and nappies and things like that. Not my thing at all, but it was interesting to read. So the setup here is that you have this kind of mum blogger, and she has a YouTube channel, really, really famous YouTube channel, where she talks about her children and her husband comes on every now and again, and, you know, they talk about their life, and it's that kind of thing. And obviously all these women that kind of follow her and that relate to her in different ways. So you have various different women. And one day, everything just shuts down. Everything gets deleted, and the people that follow her are like, what the hell? You know, and we're talking someone who has like millions of followers, right? Like, what is going on? And these women are like obsessed with like what exactly has happened. And you start to sort of unravel the mystery of where has this blogger gone? What has happened to her? I don't know if this is the most thriller book I've ever read. Like I said, it's interesting to delve into their world, because like I knew nothing about that. The kind of YouTuber angle, this is set in London, is interesting. And what is actually going on. And this one, again, is very much like people are not as they seem. And it's one of those books where characters stop you like, oh, that's how they connect, that kind of thing. But if you're interested in any of that, this one works as well. And then I've got a couple of non-fiction as well. So if, like I said, The Dark Side of the Mind is really good. And if you're just interested in crime generally, I have these two. So this is Bizarre Crimes, the Mammoth Book of Bizarre Crimes. This is Incredible Real Life Murders. This is just basically the tagline on the back says you couldn't make it up. It's basically some of the most bizarre real life crimes. Again, like a true crime podcast, but in book form. And then this one here, this is She Kills Me. And this is the true stories of history's deadliest women, a topic that I particularly love. I don't feel like there's enough books about female serial killers, is what I'm saying, or female killers. So I really, really like this. And if you like this, you'll love the Mindfuck series, because that is amazing. Anyway, that's my video. Let me know what you think. Let me know your thoughts on the books, the true crime, all of that. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll speak to you all again soon. Bye.